make sure the energy in the room is high, and so I always take a photo before I present, and I want to see a little bit of energy from you folks. So can somebody out there maybe shout, Ontario Craft Brewers!
Ontario Craft Brewers!
Okay, that was decent. Honestly, it's probably the cheesier way to start a presentation, but at least you know that I'm going to give you a bit of energy today. It's about storytelling. Come on in, yay! So, storytelling today, it's a superpower. Now, we've talked yesterday, and what great speakers we had yesterday, about process and working with the LCBO and beer store and such. It's the business of selling your craft beer. Part of that is telling your story, because you have 300-400 breweries in Ontario who are all trying to do the same thing. They're trying to sell their amazing craft beer to the very same customer you're going after. Are you competitors? Yeah, but you're also peers. There is a lot of room for each of you to have a runway for sales. Storytelling is going to help you put your story in front of the customer at the right time. Because I might buy a bunch of different craft breweries, right? What makes you the one I want right now? All right, so I would argue, and I'm not going to use the mic
because I sound weird.
If you can't hear me, just give me one of these. I would argue that the brand story is the single most important part of your marketing strategy. Because it's going to be a filter. It's going to be the way that you can, in one sentence, tell how you're different from everybody else. Now, this is me. Market your craft. We provide breweries, wineries, and distilleries with tools. Tools to drive traffic to your tasting room. Tools to build engagement with your social media following. And then most importantly, tools to capture new sales, because that's what we need, right? You're going to see different examples brought up in my presentation, and I'm not putting anyone on blast. I want to make sure we know that these are good examples. But I want for us to, as a community of craft brewers, to be able to look at best practices and kind of pick them apart to see what's working, what's not working, how I might be able to take that back to my team and actually use it. Now, this is a good example, but I want to pick it apart a little bit. What I have highlighted here, dedicated to pure craftsmanship, only using high-quality ingredients. Big Rig Brewery takes great pride in reinventing classic styles and crafting emerging ones. That's a pretty solid one-liner. I think we could all agree. It kind of tells what they're about, what their vision is, what they're going to offer. Yeah, come on in. But it doesn't go quite far enough, because it's us telling you, the customer, what we do. Not necessarily recognizing what the customer wants from us, right? Outbound versus inbound. Having pride in what you do and telling people what you do is great, but you also have to recognize what they want and need from you, and you have to meet them in the middle. All right, so you're going to see more examples like this. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. I wouldn't be up here because we wouldn't need a presenter telling you about storytelling. I was just at the Great American Beer Festival in Denver. I live in Denver. Great American Beer Festival is amazing, and for the United States, it's one of those key moments, those key events for craft brewers like us, because if you enter the competition and you medal, that's a launch pad for you. No doubt. You've at least, if you use it correctly, you've at least got 6 months to a year of visibility, where you can start to have bigger conversations with your distributors. You can start to talk about maybe bigger region, multi-state, right? Because medaling at the Great American Beer Festival has a lot of cachet, with it right now. But I'm going to suggest to you that 300 medals and 268 breweries, only 34% of the Great American Beer Festival winners this year are doing storytelling right. So they only got half of it right. They got the product, they got the medal, but how they're marketing that craft to their consumer, they're still falling a little bit short. Now in Ontario, after taking a look at all your websites, I think 9% maybe of the Ontario Craft Brewers Guild is getting this right. It's not a criticism, it just shows that we've got some runway, we've got some distance to go. Because the About Us page on your website is not a brand story. How your brewery was founded is not a brand story. We need to step away and look from a customer perspective. How much do I care about home brewing in your garage? Really, not to be critical, just to be factual. Today, I want you to leave with the tools you need to write that one-liner and realizing what exactly it means and how it's going to help you get more sales. Now, my name's Scott Colby. I work for Market Your Craft, and we do this again for breweries, wineries, and distilleries. We help them figure out the strategies and the marketing tactics that are going to help them get recognized in this very crowded craft space. And we've done this for a bunch of fun companies, including Partake, which is a Canadian company who does non-alcoholic, if you're familiar. We saw the presentation and panel yesterday with Steve Burmeister, which was a lot of fun. And it's fun to talk about non-alcoholic because it's real and it's something that we need to all be conscious of, if not already. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. It's difficult to find the stats for the overall beer market and then craft as a part of that for Canada. The best I could come up with, and somebody shout out if they've got more accurate, was about $7.4 billion, of which craft is about more or less 10%. Somebody fact check me here. Are we close? Okay, so the scale is what we're interested in, right? It's about 10% of overall domestic beer. Now, just in comparison, the US sits at about 100 billion US dollars, with craft being about a quarter of that. So every 1 in 4 beers sold, rough math, is craft beer. Why we're even talking today is because craft is crowded, and it's all relative to Ontario and the other provinces, the states. It's state to state, province to province, countrywide. Craft is crowded. There's a lot of noise out there. How are we going to set ourselves apart? And I'll just be honest, customers are kind of lazy, and we know this. Customers are going to want to buy the beer that makes them feel a certain way, or that's easy to say yes to, or that jumps off the shelf with the packaging, or has an incredible social media presence. Customers want the fastest route to yes, because any additional time I need to spend thinking about it is time I could be doing something else. And life is crazy right now, and I need all that energy to be playing around somewhere else than thinking what beer I'm going to drink. Now, the brand story, from a marketing perspective, is perfect for being a filter for you. It's almost like looking through a pair of glasses at a marketing piece and saying, oh, that just doesn't feel like my brand. Oh, that's slightly left to center. We're not going to say that. On social media, ooh, better not post that. The one-liner is what everything in marketing needs to ladder up to, and it serves as a filter that way. I'm not going to do a 101 on advertising and marketing. Most of you folks get this, but I want to put brand story in the context of marketing and advertising. And so when you look at it, The brand story, it's that kernel, that core, that single line. Now marketing builds up around that. And marketing could be, again, those owned channels like your website, the low-hanging fruit, the easy stuff. And then advertising is when you start to throw money against it. Hey, you know what? This advertising, or rather this image or this marketing slogan, it's really catching on with social. Maybe we should boost the posts. Or I think we actually have a little bit of a net that we can cast digitally. Let's spend on search engine marketing, right? So when you have a core idea that's resonating with people and you spend money against it, we call that advertising. But the brand story is at the core of all of that. Mushroom. Now, I like this. I like the simplicity of this, and I'll read it for those who can't see the type. A small batch brewery located in Haliburton, Ontario, focused on cottage living, and great tasting beer. We offer a selection of brews handcrafted and sure to please. Okay, now I bring that one up because one, it's very succinct. Two, it helps paint a picture. What's so important is giving potential drinkers a sense of place. Because if on my website, I can help a person see myself sitting in a seat at your bar, see myself enjoying a can at home after I picked it up. That's a win. You've connected with that potential customer. And as I would suggest, we need all the customers we can get. So they go further. And this is what we like. We like to see it extend past just the website into social. So they're starting to use, and this might be my interpretation of it, it may or may not have been strategic, but I'm going to give them the props anyways. They use that one-liner on the website. Social media should reflect a sense of place. Beautiful, right? And so this is cottage living. This is that sense of place. Now, to the extent that you can parlay that into each of your channels, social, digital, events if you do it, sampling, public relations, like you start to see that one-liner is dictating everything should ladder up to that. Everything needs to give that sense of place. Now, a lot of people use the origin story as their brand story. And we're going to talk about why that could or couldn't work. It's easy to tell. Nobody knows the brand story better than you folks. The owners, the brewers, the management. It's coming from the heart. Nobody can dispute it. So this is corner of my office. I love the homebrew and I make wine and I always have something brewing or fermenting, but so did you before you started your breweries, right? Somebody said, man, you make great beer. You should really think about doing it commercially. It's a lot better than the stuff down the street. Open up your own brewery. How many of us could raise our hands and say, yeah, that's pretty close, pretty close. I wasn't gifted 2 truckloads of money and I just decided to put a brewery together. That's typically not the case, right? You start from humble beginnings as a home brewer, and then you ladder it up. It's the spirit of craft. But everybody can say that same thing. And so, how are you different? And this is tough with your About Us page because you're going to show the owners or the brewers, the team. You're going to give those 2-liners or 2 paragraphs about 10 years ago, I started in my basement. I mean, everybody does it, but that is not the brand story because that's not separating you from anybody else. Can we agree on that? it is the brand story if it checks one of these boxes. You were the first. Chances are good that you didn't invent beer. I'm just saying. There are some of you out there who might say that you're pioneering a new style of beer. Possibly, but like when you do the sniff test, are you really the only one? If you're the best, which we have a lot of pride in our work, of course, but can any one of us say we're better than any craft brewer? Not really. And then there's also that kind of philanthropic approach. There are probably some seats if you want to grab one. I don't want you to stand the whole time. Okay. Philanthropic approach. Now, let's take a look at these two out-of-industry examples, because sometimes it's easiest for us to take a look at something completely foreign in order to understand how to apply it to our situation. Red Bull, Dietrich Mateschitz, and he actually died this past weekend, coincidentally, but he's on a plane ride home from Thailand, and he's like, oh man, the jet lag and the hangover, I need something, and he co-founded Red Bull. And we know where that went. Now, is he arguably the first? Probably the first at that scale. How about the best? Maybe not the best energy drink out there, but he leaned into both of those and has created a global empire and F1 racing team and everything that's spun off of that as a result. Tom's, Blake Markowski. Now, at or around 2006, he was traveling to Argentina and he realized just how desperate the situation was for kids not having shoes. And so he gives back, right? Arguably, he leans into, and the company leans into the philanthropic side, and they own that. That is their brand story. That's what people, if you ever buy Tom's shoes, that's what you're buying into, and why you might pay a little bit extra. So if you have one of those 2 or 3 characteristics with your origin story, then you can lean into that. But again, it's a tougher sell in craft beer because we're not the first. I'd say forefathers. I like this example. Again, difficult to read, but the idea is friendship, like our craft brews, is based on a simple formula. Stand up for each other, stand up for something bigger than yourself, and stand up for the antiquated notion that quality craft beer matters. Okay, not being critical, a little on the wordy side. Also, buried in the site and not in the forefront. The stand for is on the homepage, but it's not explained. So if we were to use our formula for brand story, this would check some of the boxes, but not check all of the boxes. But again, we're looking at these examples and we're seeing our own breweries in these examples. Are we clear? Are we painting a picture? Did forefathers give the origin story in a way that was kind of compelling? Makes me want to know more. Yeah, I'd say they probably did. So kudos to them for that. And if you're in the room, thank you for letting me use the example. This is a second kind of line of thinking. Origin story was the first. The second is going to be reason for being. Now, this is a little easier than origin story, but again, not everybody's going to be able to use it. You attack a problem head on. Craft beer has gone in the wrong direction, and I'm going to right that course. Like you take a stand on something. Underdog, kind of like the Avis car rental, right? We try harder. That's an out-of-industry example, but if you can say the same about your brewery, maybe there's a parallel there. You shape an experience. In Denver, actually, there's a brewery called Cohesion, and they would suggest that the true Czech-style pour is based on the amount of foam that you get in your glass, which was crazy to me, but I did it, and they leaned into it, and they explain it, and it's a ritual, and You know, you're paying $6 for 3/4 of a glass of foam. You know, it's tasty foam. However, they are shaping that experience and they're leading into that, right? You've got rabid fans. If people just love you, then create a group around those folks. Like we've worked with Maker's Mark ambassadors. If you're familiar with Maker's Mark, the whiskey, I mean, it's just iconic. Jack Daniel's, very similar. Founders are visible. If you've got Sam Calagione from Dogfish Head in your back pocket, use them, you know. Highly visible in the industry, well respected, now part of Boston. But forever, again, he was a highly visible founder and the face of the brand. Ken Grossman, to a lesser degree, equal in terms of prestige, but he's a little more reserved and not so extroverted. And then the last part is instilling confidence. So a couple examples here. Patagonia, everybody's familiar with. What are they doing? They're giving back. They are actively trying to address climate change. What they've done most recently is basically create 2 companies, the revenue for which wholly goes back to, for perpetuity, forever, goes back to fighting climate change. They are standing behind what they collectively believe in. And we as customers applaud them for it with our dollars. And Zappos, they changed the experience. If you've ever bought from Zappos, it's buying shoes online. They were pretty much the first to revolutionize that. Sure, there was shoe selling online before that, but not the way they did it. Now, how easy it was, returns, customer service. They shaped a shoe buying experience online, and they got bought up by Amazon as a result of it. Okay, now I would suggest that Collective Arts probably does a pretty good job of this. Again, if you're in the room, thank you. So what we're seeing is they're celebrating artists, and they're really celebrating that community of artists, and they're leaning into that. But you don't want to lie. Customers are going to see right through that. Saying something that you don't believe in, most recently in some of these political, racial, or other situations, coattailing or dovetailing on a movement that you don't believe in is not going to get you anywhere, and actually it's going to go quite the opposite direction pretty fast, because customers see through that when you don't have a history. So don't tell a story that isn't yours, because it has to resonate with them, it has to land with them. Here's an example. If any of you got a call from a buddy and said, hey, I've got tickets to a show, you want to go? First thing you're going to ask is, well, what show? Because you may want to see your friend, but you might not want to shell out $70 for a show that you don't want to see. Well, that's the same thing. If I tell you, hey, you want to go have a beer, if I don't give you any more detail, you're going to say, well, what kind of beer? Well, where are we going? What, is there live music? Will I be able to eat something? Again, this is what we do. We help people try and put these strategies and plans together because we want the brand story to capture the attention of your drinker. We want to engage them. Now I'm going to go through 2 or 3 slides that are going to give us a little bit more background on a practical brand story that everybody here could take away. Who's your customer? Do we ever really take a minute out of the busy day to say, who's buying our beer? It's not just the person always at the corner table. It's got to be bigger than that. You have to think bigger than that. I would suggest that you need to start thinking about 3 times the number of customers that you have right now. That's your goal. I want to attract 3 times the number of customers because, no offense, but customers aren't loyal anymore, more or less. They're not going to always only go to your brewery. Now, if you have 3 times, then you're starting to think about increasing your sales, increasing your traffic, because you're replacing current customers. Again, no offense, but they're not going to be here forever. Replace them. Think about replacing them. What's the net that you have to cast in order to get those kind of numbers? What do they drink? What are their interests? Who's competing against you? Now, it's not just your brewery neighbor down the street. It's kombucheries, cideries, meaderies. It's any competition for that dollar in that moment. Bars, restaurants. What do you own? Again, where are you clearly superior to these competitors? Is it the experience? Is it the product? And that's subjective. Is it your staff, your beer tenders? Is it the lakeside view that we have? Whatever that is, figure out those pieces that you can own. Because you're looking for share mind. These people are lazy. We talked about that. They're always doing something. They want an easy pathway to yes. Now, would your competitors, are they more present? Are they more active in the community? Are they at events? Are they sampling? How are they showing up to your same customers? How are your competitors stacking up in terms of share of mind? Are you above them, below them? It's okay for us to sit at a table and kind of beat ourselves up every once in a while because we have to be real about what's happening around us. Are they getting press mentions? We're looking for what makes us different, what makes us unique. And it's challenging, but I would encourage you, again, the tools that you're going to see today, to take this back to the team and just say, let's press pause and let's get this right, because 2023 depends on it. You're really looking at what you offer guests from a different set of lenses. You're looking outward in. How do the customers see us? What do the customers want from us? Instead of, what do I give them? What are they going to take from me? So you need a brand story. We talked about your storyline, whether or not that's the origin story, if you can own that. If it's the reason for being, what makes you unique? Again, if you have a solid understanding of who your customer is, that's the second piece of it. You know very well who your competitor is, and then what makes you different, and that's a superpower. From a marketing perspective, that's where you start. You may have an established marketing team, you may have done campaigns, you may have spent a lot of money against it, and that's great. But can you answer these questions? Big brewery, small brewery. Can you answer these questions? This is what I would suggest that we need to leave here today with. A one-liner that answers this question. I am a business that takes some bold action to deliver value to guests who deserve more. Okay, now taken at face value, I want you to be able to insert your business, your adjectives, your descriptors in that statement. And I should have said this too, all of this is going to be available on Hoova afterwards too. So if you're taking photos or pictures, you'll definitely have this. Okay, we'd start with your business. Now most of you are going to say, yeah, a brewery. Some might be a brewery winery. We've worked with dispensaries, kombucheries. Like this applies across the board with craft beverage. So what business are you in? All right, I'm a brewery. Perfect. You took some bold action. Now this is for you to decide, but you could stop at brewing, or you could say creating. You start to get a little bit more color there. Formulating, a little heady, a little sciencey, but if science is your thing, collaborating, infusing, what's the right action? How do you folks describe what you do every single day beyond just brewing? Because again, the more color, the more clarity you can give it, the customers are going to latch on to those words. Okay, that's slightly different. I'm not just talking about wordplay. It's not meant to be marketing fluff. It's meant to be real and clear for customers who aren't going to take more than a second to decide whether or not to visit you. Because you're delivering value. Sure, beer, I get it. But maybe it's service, maybe it's entertainment, maybe it's some combination of the two. Maybe it's beer, seltzer, and non-alcoholic. Whatever it is, be as clear as possible on what you're delivering for folks. And then the guests deserve more. Have you recognized what's unique about your guests? You talked about what's unique to you, but what's unique to your guests? What interest do they have? They could be affiliated with groups, bike clubs. If biking is something you can lean into. Behaviors, maybe interests. We're going to see a couple examples just to give you a flavor of how you might shape this yourself. Now, this is absolutely the bare minimum of what I would suggest. I am a brewery that offers beer and seltzer for customers to enjoy in our tap room. That's better than 90% of what I saw on the Guild websites. So this is the bare minimum. If this showed up on the homepage of your website, imagine somebody doing a brewery near me search on their mobile phone. And this popped up, not only in the search, but the first second of being on the homepage. You just answered a need for customers in that exact moment. 90% of the Guild members aren't doing this right now. Bare minimum. Let's take 2 on this. A little bit more ownership, and I'm starting to get into those kind of colorful words. I'm a local brewery. Local still matters in a lot of cases. Makes beer for visitors to enjoy while listening to music. Okay, what did I do there? We tapped into a bit of that interest level with the customer. One more. Now, Discover Ale Works is fictitious, but let's say that it exists. They brew a selection of rotating beer styles for guests to enjoy with live music and Denver's most sought-after food trucks. Now, it goes back to the Halliburton example. You're trying to establish a sense of place where people can see themselves verbally enjoying a beer sitting in your tap room. It's not magic. It's just very straightforward. Tell them what you're going to give them. And then deliver exactly that. And they're going to come back because they weren't disappointed. They didn't make the wrong choice. Okay, so you start to see your own story, your own one-liner in this formula. Very straightforward. Old Flame. Building off the heartwarming feeling of nostalgia. Follow me. Our brewery is deeply rooted in tradition. Our tap rooms are carefully curated with finishings of yesteryear, and our brewing process builds off the classic German lagering techniques, paying homage to the past while paving the way for an inclusive and innovative future. Okay, now, cheesy as it sounds, but if you close your eyes, you're there. You start to see yourself sitting in what you would imagine to be a very nostalgic brew setting, tasting room. Now, I would suggest this might be a little wordy. It could be a little outward and not inward, but it's really close because it started to paint that picture, that sense of place. And so I'd applaud them for this. We're in the final slides now, and I want to make sure that you understand how far-reaching this brand story goes. Because once you get it right, it plays on your website, just like the example we gave, towards the top of your homepage. That filters into search engine marketing and Google and how Google indexes you. That one-liner shows up when you do a brewery search near me. Social. We started to see, again, that cottage living feel portrayed in the imagery of the social in the example. Help guests to see themselves sitting at your brewery. E-commerce. We know the limitations of e-commerce from a product perspective, but anything that you're selling merch-wise, events-wise, tie that sale back to your brewery and use that story. This is another touch point. We don't want to miss that opportunity to tell the story when package is in hand, the unboxing of something. How does that add one more layer to the story that you delivered prior to the sale? Public relations. I truly believe that public relations is underutilized, and some people might say, it's a little scary, and how do you talk to journalists, and how do you you just have to start with one. You start with one press release, and there are press release templates. You can do it for free. There are media-friendly journalists out there in your city, in your region, in your province. You know who these people are, the people who are always talking about craft beer. Some of them ask to interview you. Some of them are always present at your events. I feel like we don't use public relations nearly enough to announce new beer releases, expansions, new distribution. Email. Some would say email is dead. I don't buy it. I think email is still a very powerful, successful, high-performing call to action. If you have an email database that you've curated over time, use it. Because when they get that, these are your most loyal customers, and they are going to more than likely take action. But you start to see an opportunity to maybe shape those emails in a slightly different way, with your brand story as your filter, as your core. How does your email back that story up? And then events. Some of you may be lucky enough to have the budgets to sponsor events or local community gatherings and things like this. And events bring that story to life. If you're talking about cottage living, how did you bring the cottage life to downtown Toronto today? How did you transport people from wherever they are, headspace-wise or otherwise, to exactly where you want them to be in that moment in time? If you look at events that way, are you falling short because you just have a 10 by 10 with some generic fabric backdrop behind you? A lot of these things, again, they may depend on budgets and teams, and I respect that for sure, but try to bring that feeling to your events. Tasting room, is your tasting room set up to deliver on that brand story? Is it subconscious? Does a guest walk in there and they are taken again to the place where you want and need them to be? Is it subtle with decorations? Is it more overt with tasting mats and whatnot? How do you bring that story to life? Donations. I like kind of the charitable aspect of this. We don't have to be 100% philanthropic like Tom's Shoes. However, donations and anything charity-wise, if your team actually executes cleanups and things like this as team-building events, but giving back to the community, use that brand story as a filter. It's not that you want to say yes or no to efforts, but if 5 of these donations actually speak squarely to who I am as a brewery, you bet that backs up your brand story. restaurants, retail. You folks know this better than I do, the challenges they're in. But if you have any play, if you have any means of telling that story at point of sale, coasters, things like this, whatever promotional items you might be able to provide to your accounts and those stores that actually sell you, give them the training that they need. Talked a little bit about community. You can, like in that bike club example, you can definitely lean into that. And then ambassadors, these are people who are foot soldiers of your brand. How about an example from Sawdust? Now, the Sawdust example is dedicated to exploring all possibilities of beer. Experimentation is in our DNA, and we consider ourselves brewing pioneers. Now, I like it, it's bold. Again, if you're in the audience, I appreciate you. I want to make sure that we're also humble. Pioneers gets into that kind of strange area where you're claiming to be something that others could also claim, and so you have to be able to back those kind of statements up. But I believe that this touches right on where it needs to be, and it's very upfront on the homepage. Halliburton, we kind of mentioned this before. This is old school brewing. Now, I think that we can go a little further, but I like the fact that this is the first thing that you see on the homepage. Halliburton Highlands Brewing is an award-winning microbrewery producing handcrafted premium ales as fresh and natural as the highlands that inspire them. Okay, it's a little on the marketing side. I need for this one to go just a little bit further to establish a sense of place, because not everybody is familiar with the highlands, potentially. And then the last example, I think that we should all look at this together. Common good. Now, I know it's a slightly different model for them, but they also are leaning into not only brand personality, damn, we love beer, the entire site kind of leans into that little bit of an edgy feeling. And that's not something that we covered today, but it's something that's very important to who you are as a brand and what your voice is. But what they suggest is we're constantly brewing up a rotating cast of common good originals. But there's a social thing, and so it's about community, and we contract brew a lot of your local favorites. Okay, so it's honest, it's transparent, but they're starting to establish rotating. They know exactly what they're giving customers, and customers know what they're getting. And then from a B2B perspective, a business-to-business perspective, you know exactly what they stand for. Again, slightly left of center from the other examples that we looked at, but definitely worth mentioning. Your superpower is making and selling great beer. You know you make great beer, but if people aren't buying it, we have a problem. Now, we talked about a lot of different tools today. All of those are really geared towards getting you 3 times the amount of traffic that you have right now, 3 times the amount of sales, because we're trying to understand that in this vast sea of 300 to 400 breweries in the Ontario region, we have competitors and friends. We have people we're up against, and we have peers. And we need to be able to sell our beer at the exact moment that the customer, who's also buying other beers, wants to buy us. Storytelling will help with that. All of these things that we've talked about, you can't go wrong when you start with an understanding of your customer. Again, it's who I am versus what they want. And with that, we have a bunch of different guides, and I'll give it to you for free. Jump on the website. If any of this could help you to tell your story in a really meaningful way, it's yours. Jump on the website. We have storytelling as well as digital, email, e-commerce, social. And with that, I'll end by thanking you for the opportunity today. And let's talk. Let's ask the questions that you've been so patiently waiting to ask. Something on your mind? Yeah.
So, just if you were advising a brewery, what techniques how would you advise them to go and actually listen to the customer and understand who the customer is?
That's an awesome question. If you didn't hear, I'll paraphrase, but the idea is, how do we start getting a better understanding of our customers? It starts with the people who are sitting in your tap room every Wednesday. It starts by simply asking folks, hey, would you mind? I'll give you a couple beers. We're going to get 5 of you in a room, and we're just going to ask you questions. Are you okay with that? It's informal surveys. You can spend a lot of money against, syndicated research and whatnot, and I'd say start with what's right in your backyard. When you're at an event, how observant are you when you're sampling people? Hey, what do you think about this? Oh, you like it? Oh, what questions do you have? Is it gluten-free? They are going to tell you so much if you're listening. Hope that helps. Yeah. You had a question right here. Yeah.
I was just hoping you could speak more to the capturing of both the inward and the outward messaging in the brand story.
Capturing.
Kind of like the main difference of the two that kind of separate them.
Great question. So the idea is outbound versus inbound. The main differences and how to maybe articulate both. Outbound, if I'm understanding you correctly, outbound is going to be something that matters to me. So it's, I founded the brewery, here's the story, here are the beers that I produce, and here's the taproom experience that I'm giving you. Now, if you flip that and you look outside, then it's your customer saying, I am a husband or a wife with 2 kids and very little time, and I have this much disposable income, and I took them to soccer practice and I'm before volleyball practice, and I've got an hour. What do you have to offer me? Now that's a random example off the top of my head, but when you look at it from that perspective, they want beer selection, they want a comfortable, family-friendly environment that they can bring 2 of their kids who don't mind sitting around for a half hour while they're having a pint in your tasting room. Did you provide them with the environment for that occasion, right? And then how that would play out in the brand story would be potentially a rotating list of core and seasonal favorite beers in a family-friendly environment and a spacious tasting room, or an outdoor patio and dog-friendly. You start to ladder in those adjectives that paint that picture that make your brewery more attractive for that scenario that we described. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it is.
Perfect. Yeah. What other questions do we have? In the back, yeah.
Yeah, so we talked a lot about, or you talked a lot about the story, and I appreciate that. How do you get those new people? I mean, people don't read the newspaper. People don't listen to the radio. I hear every day people dropping their social media. It's bogging me down. It's taking too much of my time. So how do you get 3 times that new customer?
Yeah, it's a great question. Again, for everybody's benefit, a lot of storytelling we talked about today, but how do you reach the new people, especially if you're trying to go for 3x? So I would start with the low-hanging fruit. And when you get the brand story right on your website, the website's going to work for you. Search engine marketing is going to work for you. Social, I hear what you're saying. People are bogged down. They're looking at new channels, not necessarily the same old 3 of Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, right? And so do you reach out to them by way of TikTok? That's not what I'm suggesting either. But where are your customers? where would you find the people who look like your current customers? Where do you find them? Are they the next town over? If it's the next town over, what are you doing to actively market to those folks? Is it the next province over because you have that kind of regionality? Well, then I would ask the same question. Are you sending out a press release, which is free, again, it just takes time, which many of us don't have, I get it, but are you sending out a press release that gets picked up by the local industry and consumer publications in the province over in order to start to raise the awareness of your brewery to those same people? So knowing who the customer is, and then understanding where you are geographically and what your reach is, and then expanding that and starting to look at the free versus the paid advertising vehicles is a great place to start, perhaps. Does that help? Does it go as far as you need to go?
We do those things.
Sure.
Last year we did the farmer's market in our town of 100,000 people, and you're dragging people in from the aisles and they're saying, well, how long have you been there? We didn't know you were here. This is 4 years into the game, and we've had umpteen press releases in the paper, and cable TV programming done, and all those things, but you still, the majority of the people don't know you're there. And that's where I struggle.
It's a great challenge to have, because it sounds like you've got budget that you're actively spending against grabbing new people. So you at least have the luxury of budget. The budget question for me would be, are you spending it now in those areas that are providing fruit, that are bearing fruit for you? And maybe it just takes a little more, a slightly different strategic look at how you're spending those dollars in your outside markets. And potentially that could be digital advertising, boosted posts, being very strategic and targeted about your audience and the social channels. All of those things, if you're not doing those already, could be an opportunity. And if you are, then I would suggest maybe it's a slight tweak to the keywords and the audience segmentation that you're using and spending money against. Yeah, happy to talk more about it later too, if you'd like. What else? Any other questions? Are we starting to see our breweries benefiting from a one-liner? Does it resonate? The value? More or less, it's new for some folks, I get it, but trust me on this one, it's proven fruitful for breweries who have gone to the next level in terms of their sales and engagement. Well, with that, thank you for. Thank you so much. And I'm going to put this up on Hoop. Come ask me questions if you have them, and enjoy the rest of the conference.